Hare Krishna, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes,
Yeah.
good. Okay. So this section has two very important points. One is meditation on the form of the Lord, and the other one is anarta nivritti, which is, or anartas, Prabhupada in the purport to the text number 12, he talks about these brahmastras, these weapons of the material energy. So we'll get to that too. That's a very important section. But let's begin. Would someone like to read? Colin, did you have your hand up to read? Oh,
Okay.
someone would like to read? Otherwise, I'm going to call on someone.
Oh yeah, I'll read.
Okay, you read.
Actually, my hand is up on the first time. I couldn't find out how to
Okay,
spell it
don't
down.
worry, Angel. Just you
Okay.
read.
I'll read. Text 2:8. Others conceive of the personality of Godhead residing within the body in the region of the heart and measuring only 8 inches, with 4 hands carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell, and a club, respectively. What does this mean? If we are not able to see the Lord as described here, does it mean that he does not exist? Is his existence dependent upon our being able to perceive him? Antarakasha.
Okay. Now I'm going to make a little comment, or I'm going to ask, does anyone understand what that means? Does that, we understand that the Lord, and we read it in the text coming, that there is nothing material about Krishna. He's completely spiritual. How is it that he is situated in a material muscle in our body? Is that where he is? Okay, you can mute yourself now for a little bit, Colin, because when you're thank you. Does anyone, can anyone help me with this? Okay, Vajra. Unmute Vajra. Unmute. I can't hear you, darling. You have to unmute yourself.
Got it.
Okay, good.
Well, he is bigger than the biggest, smaller than the smallest. So he can take any forms, and he's unattached to the body. He's transcendental, just like the soul is transcendental, super soul is transcendental.
That's true. That's true. So his form in the heart, he is existing in a part of the heart that is not material. The heart is the source of energy throughout the body, just like the sun is the source of the energy throughout the universe. So the Lord is situated in a part of the heart that is completely spiritual. It has nothing to do with the muscle of the heart. It is a place called Antarakash. It is a spiritual place in the heart. Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about this place, which has nothing to do with the material world. And through that place, we can become aware of the spiritual world. We can actually enter the spiritual world through the process of bhakti yoga, through this channel in the heart. It is not a material thing, and it is something that we will cultivate as we chant and become purified. It's being covered up at this moment by the modes of material nature. Okay, is that understandable? Some things, even though we don't understand them, we have to accept them because it's said like this in the Vedas. The Vedas are the source of all knowledge. So let's go on reading. How about Karna? Karna, could you please read?
Actually, I think Badger had a question.
Oh, Bajaji, yes.
So the heart transplant has nothing to do with the soul or super soul, because soul super soul stays, and the heart has no. Is that right?
Yes, right. The heart transplant has nothing to. Although they say that when you have a heart transplant, there's different things that are. There might be some subtle energy there, but that's a whole other discussion. But we know that the Lord has nothing to do with anything material, and his presence in the heart is not a material thing. Okay, so let's go on with Karna. Karna, please, reading.
Okay, so text 9 then?
No, read the purport.
Purport.
There was just a little section of the purport.
Okay. The form of the Lord described in this verse with distribution, that part?
Yes, Pati, put up the, there you go.
The form of the Lord described in this verse with distribution of different symbols, beginning from the lower right hand up and down to the lower left with the lotus, wheel of a chariot, conch shell, and club respectively, is called Janardhan, or the plenary portion of the Lord, who controls the general mass.
I thought that was really far out. The general mass, that is the Lord present in every atom. This material world is considered to be the general mass, all the bodies, all the atoms, everything. So Karna, why don't you just read the next verse there?
Okay.
And wait, one moment. If anybody has any questions during this, please feel free to ask, because this is what this discussion is for, to answer or discuss any things that might be confusing or need attention. So please don't feel shy to ask a question if you need to.
I want to point out here that in my letter that I sent to everybody this morning, the email, I mentioned that if you have a question about the month's study, that you have it on hand. Samapriya is not talking about that kind of question right now. I'll have a section for those questions later. These are just questions pertaining to the topic that we're talking about at the time. Go ahead.
I have a question about the last verse.
Okay, what's your question?
You said we have to connect through that channel, and then can you explain that a little bit more?
It sounds a little bit esoteric and new agey, but actually it's very old agey, because there is one, and we will read more about this as we get to the next section on when the yogis are meditating on the heart and able to connect with Krishna. This is subtle energy, it's spiritual energy. So, but there is a place, there's a place in the heart where that Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes as being cities and towns and everything is effulgent and self-realized. This is the entrance to the spiritual world. We are at the doorway. We have come to this movement. We have come to Srila Prabhupada. We've come to reading the Bhagavatam, so we will understand our relationship with the spiritual world and with Krishna. So, and through this process of bhakti yoga. And as I said before, if we don't completely understand these things, that's quite all right, because they're very difficult to understand. But through this process of hearing and sadhana bhakti, it will be revealed to us. It will. There's a reason why it's said that the Lord in the heart. There's reasons for everything. So
which book of Bhaktivinoda Thakur is that?
That's Navadvip Mahatmya. I quoted in my
Mahatmya. It's the second part.
And also I quoted in my book in the section called Antarakash. It's just verbatim. So who is, okay, is that all right, Madhurya? Okay, she's done.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Karna, why don't you read this verse, the next one?
Okay. His mouth expresses his happiness. His eyes spread like the petals of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like the saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are all made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. Oh, it's so beautiful. Purport. The ornaments.
That's
flowers,
not actually what's on the screen. Can you not see the screen?
No, I've got the people, participants, I can't.
If you click the view, Vaishnavi, can you explain to her how to change her view so she can see the text on the screen?
100%, request remote control, exit full screen.
The exit full screen, yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's better. Okay, so then he wears a glowing, his lotus feet are placed over the whorls of the lotus-like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kostapa jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. Purport?
Yes.
The ornaments, flowers, clothing, and all other decorations on the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead are identical with the body of the Lord. None of them are made of material ingredients. Otherwise, there would be no chance of their decorating the body of the Lord. As such, in the Parvyoma, spiritual varieties are also distinguished from the material variegatedness.
So, okay, so right there, this is getting more clear now. Krishna's, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that everything that has to do with the Lord, his body, his ornaments, magnificent ornaments, these are not material. So this place in the heart is also not material. I was reading the Gita Govinda this morning, the Gita Mala. Pushkar Prabhu was giving class here in Alachua, and he quoted from this book. And there are two little verses I just wanted to read that actually support this understanding of the spiritual nature of the Lord and his all-pervasive spiritual nature. O Lord Hari, as long as the mind of the living entity remains conditioned by Maya, it wanders about in the material atmosphere. In the spiritual world, which is the abode of the Supreme Lord, everyone is fully cognizant. However, the mind of the conditioned soul cannot perceive him. If the living entity cuts to pieces the bondage of conditional life by the weapon of devotional service and the Lord's mercy, his mind can travel to the spiritual world. And the mind is situated in the heart, which is beyond the material creation. There he sees your exquisite, beautiful form, and so he naturally abandons all attachment for the material objects. This is basically what we're trying to do. I thought this was really beautiful. How about Manvantara? Thank you. Manvantara, could you continue reading?
Bhadra has his hand up.
Oh, Bhadra. Bhadraji.
Unmute.
So this is where this description of this Lord's everything, eyes, ears. This is of the super soul within the heart. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that means for example, if the Hanuman Ishtadev is the Sitaram, is that mean the super soul is expanding in the form of the super soul, and Hanuman is saying the Sitaram
Yeah. Yes.
in his heart?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
you.
my understanding. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Manvantaraji, would you like to read a little?
Okay, give me a second to bring that up.
Okay. And if there's any questions aside from Bhadra, we can hear them too and discuss.
He is well decorated with an ornament wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person amongst all others, and Srila Sukadeva Goswami describes every part of his transcendental beauty, one after another, in order to teach the impersonalist that the personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee or faculty of worship, but is the Supreme Person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiations from the sun.
Thank you. Prabhupada, throughout all of his writings, and especially in the first cantos, he is very adamant about defeating impersonalism. That is why we are meditating in the form of the Lord. That is why we spoke about the universal form in terms of a person. To understand that there is a person, even we can't even conceive of such a person. What a person who's creating everything. And this is what Arjuna felt like when he saw the universal form. This person is all pervasive throughout the universe. And that's pretty intense to even conceive of having a relationship with such a person. See? So, but he has another form. He has his personal form that we can serve and we can have a relationship with. So throughout Srila Prabhupada's teachings, we are coming back to personalism constantly, because that's how we're going to give up our taste for material life by developing spiritual relationship and eternal relationship. We're all looking for relationships. We're looking for love and relationships, isn't it? We need to be satisfied. We need to feel that love and feeling in our hearts. We need that. And if we don't get it somehow or another, we're not getting it in the material world. We need to get it from Krishna. He's actually the only one who can give it to us. And we learn that as a process of elimination. We try and try and try and try to have a feeling of love and give ourselves to this world, and it's always disappointed. So now, anyone have any questions about this? Because now we're going to go to another big section that Srila Prabhupada spends some quality time on in this next verse.
Bhadra has a question.
Bhadraji, yes.
So the yogi is meditating on the Paramatma form of the Lord within the heart. Now there is we understand Satchidananda, full knowledge, eternity, and bliss. So yogi is meditating on the Paramatma form of the Lord. Is he seeing all these things? And besides that, let me finish. And besides that, but if I understand this, if I'm wrong, please correct me. He doesn't get the bliss. Is that right?
I'm gonna, since the next section is about Paramatma, and I'm gonna allow my husband, ask my husband to refer to that. That's a very good point, and I'm sure he will answer it. In the next
It'll get
section.
covered in the next section, Bhadra, as we come towards those verses.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Yes.
Okay, so now, wait a minute, who did I see? How about anyone else?
Colin has a question probably, or maybe she wants to read. I'm not sure.
Who? Okay.
Colin?
Colin, I think that you're still having your hand raised because you didn't turn it off. Is that true, Colin?
Unmute.
Okay, well, what we'll do here is Gopapatni, would you like to read?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm working off a phone.
Okay, this is the next verse, 2:12.
The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benediction. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord, as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation.
Go on with the purport.
These effects of bhakti yoga are called anartha nivritti. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the progress of bhakti yoga. Meditation on the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, the first processional step, must show its effect by anartha nivritti.
So this anartha nivritti means anartha, unwanted, and nivritti, without. So we are, through this meditation, the meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord will destroy all of these unwanted things in the heart. And in the next paragraphs, we will understand the source of those unwanted things. Why don't you go on for a little bit longer? And then Catherine, could you read after that, please? Go on, Gopa.
The grossest type of anartha which binds the conditioned soul in material existence is sex desire. And this sex desire gradually develops in the union of the male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives, and wealth. When all these are acquired, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and the false sense of egoism or the sense of myself and mine becomes prominent, and the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic, and many other unwanted engagements, resembling the foam of the sea wave. My goodness. Which becomes very prominent at one time, and at the next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky.
So, okay, here, can you imagine that this is all produced from sex desire? All of these things are produced from sex desire. Gopa, can you comment a little bit on that?
I'm a blank.
How about Nandaji? Nanda, can you say something about that?
Well, it just gives an indication of how entangling everything is. But I think just when Gopa was reading in the part that she got a little surprised by how it's all like it's no more important than the foam of the sea waves. We just get so engrossed in it and accumulating our area or whatever. And it's just vanquished in the oblivion of time in a second. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And thank you, Nandaji. And this myself and mine refer obviously to identification with the body. So first, Faye Catherine, would you like to read the next section? And then Pritam Day, we'll have you read after that if you can. Faye, unmute yourself.
Sex desire is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire. The sex desire is diminished along with its various forms by the process of Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially very well educated.
Okay, so one moment, please, here. These 3 words, profit, adoration, and distinction. These are the binding forces of the material nature. This is the special weapon of Maya. Because sometimes we don't realize how subtle sex desire is so powerful. You know, can you comment on some of this, Faye, how the desire for profit, adoration, and distinction actually puts out the fire of devotional service. It puts out the fire of purity. These are the things that actually each one of us, maybe I'm the only one, but I've been doing this for a long time. And my dear friend Nanda said, oh, it's okay. You should be happy that since you actually now you understand that these are the enemies. And if we understand that these are the enemies, we can recognize them in all the things that we do, and we can defeat them through the process of Bhakti Yoga. Actually, we can't defeat them. The process defeats them. Krishna defeats them. Is that making sense? What I'd like to hear what you think about that, Faye. Can you comment?
I'm thinking of the verse that describes the 3 gates of hell: lust, anger, and greed. When our desires are so focused on obtaining something that we shouldn't be obtaining, we become more and more attached and entangled in more and more webs. If I think of the devotional service as the creeper in the heart, the little tender vine that's growing in the heart, if you don't water it, if you don't provide sunlight and air, it's going to diminish. And the power of lust, anger, and greed is so obnoxious that it actually extinguishes the sunlight and the water and the air that little devotional creeper needs to thrive.
Thank you so much. That is a very nice, concise description of what happens. And just one more thing, I think it's an important study for all of us to check our activities and our motivation for doing something, because it becomes so subtle. We think we got them licked after 50 years. We got it licked. But then it starts to enter in subtle ways. And those subtle desire for profit, adoration, distinction, those subtle things keep us from that loving exchange with Krishna. So I think it would be a good exercise for all of us to just ask ourselves what our motivation really is when we're doing something. So this is a really good lesson. Pritam, could you continue reading? Would that be all right?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Knowledge means knowing things as they are. And if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. When the conditioned soul finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things.
So now we're going to hear what Lord Chaitanya thinks about all of these anarthas of the material world. This is a perfect description of this desire for profit, adoration, and distinction, this Shikshastika of 4. And Lord Chaitanya himself, who came as a devotee, is declaring to the world, these are the things that a devotee does not want. These are the things that will stand in the way of devotional service and reestablishing ourselves in our loving exchange with Krishna. Please continue, Pritam.
Shikshastaka 4. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. My only desire is your costless devotional service birth after birth.
So what do you think about that? Lord Chaitanya is telling us to do this. Prabhupada was talking in a conversation this morning with some devotees, and he was saying, if Krishna says to do something, there's no more research being needed. We don't have to research. We already hear what Krishna wants us to do. And if we actually do it, we will achieve the goal. We don't need to look any further. This is what Lord Chaitanya is saying to do. That's the goal, okay? We can recognize that we might not be achieving it completely, but if we keep our eyes steady on the goal, like Arjuna did when he shot the arrow into the eye of that bird and he won Draupadi, this is it's called Nishta, when we fix our mind on the goal. Thank you, Pritam. Who else would like to read now? Anyone, please step forward.
Nandikesh can go.
Nandikesh, yes, my darling, please.
Unmute.
Okay. So back to the purport. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire. And this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein, beginning from the feet. One should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. The smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with the 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Rasa Leela of the Lord. This is certainly improper.
Okay, so there is a method. There is a system to attain pure knowledge. There is a system, it's called Sadhana Bhakti. And it's been implemented. There's a reason why the 1st canto and the 2nd canto and the 3rd, all the way up to the 10th and beyond, there's a system. And if we follow that system that the self-realized sages have recommended, we will achieve the goal. If we jump to the 10th canto without having this knowledge, our spiritual life will be in great danger. It's as though building a building without a foundation. Now, can you conceive of building a building with no foundation? It's not possible. It won't stand, right? So this is how important it is to really develop our relationship with Krishna in the proper order and read scrutinizingly the first and second cantos. Okay, thank you. Who would like to read next? I'm trying to give everybody a turn here.
Dandakesh.
Dandakesh, yeah, okay, is she here?
Okay.
Or Kadasi Prat. Oh, Dandakesh, you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in other words, the progress of meditation on the different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of purification of the heart.
Now, one might say, oh, I want to go up to the face. I want to go quickly. But, you know, if we really meditate on the different bodily parts of the Lord, we'll achieve a great ecstasy. We will achieve a great, great ecstasy. We're not missing anything by concentrating fully, because we see the main purpose is purification of heart. That's the main purpose. By purifying our heart, we will be able to understand that and everything. And sex desire means getting rid of this sex desire is the anartha nivritti. That is the purification of the heart. You can go on reading if you like. Dandakesh.
The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the first and second cantos of the great literature. One must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then, one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Thank you, Dandakesh. Bhadra, you had a question, and before you, and then Radha, maybe you can read if you would.
Yeah.
But
Kadasi Vrat also has a question.
Okay, we'll go through the questions. I just wanted to, before we do, real quick, Srila Prabhupada is being very straightforward and stern about this. This is a process of devotional service, and we have to give it time to develop. So, and we know that I'm having such a wonderful experience reading the first and second canto. It's new life. You know, that's the thing with transcendental knowledge. Everything is ever increasing in bliss and understanding. Okay, Bhadra, what was your question? And then Ekadasi.
Okay, so Muda, like me, want to ask you, please describe in detail about maybe the example of the profit distinction address in each word. Can you describe that? Number one, profit distinction address, and please describe with the example in detail for person like me.
I didn't understand that.
He wants to know examples of one who's acting for profit, one who's acting for distinction, or one who's actually acting for adoration.
Please,
well, I can answer that. I'm all three.
Well, I didn't ask you that. I didn't tell you that. I want to know.
I'm all three. The thing is that if I have to ask you for an example, that means you're not looking in your own heart.
I'm looking in my heart because I know Bhadra is a great Kirtan leader, adoration.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so you're doing fine there. So these are things we don't have to, as we would say, we don't have to show our dirty laundry
No, but
here.
I want to make it clear to understand myself, isn't it?
Well, you have to do some
Please.
research in your own heart, Bhadra. You don't have to, we don't have to, like, this is not true for confessions that we have to say, this is what's dirty about me. I don't want to show anybody that. It's enough you got to see my face. Let's just leave it at that. Everyone do
Okay.
their research in their own heart and be honest and pray to become purified. Yes, Bhadra.
Okay.
Next.
Second question. I understand here it says, and it is systematically we study Srimad Bhagavatam, but at the same time, Srila Prabhupada also says that, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, that if you hear from the right source about the Krishna Lila from the right person, right source, then the sex desire will be removed. Is that correct?
Okay, now I will answer that question. We are hearing now from the right source. The right source is Srila Prabhupada telling how to read the Bhagavatam. So, because the sex desire, it goes so deep into our hearts, it really, really does. And we have to be very honest with ourselves, because this thing of aropa means to cover spiritual vision with material vision. I'm ready to dance with Krishna, and then it becomes very perverted. You know, better we keep a humble attitude on this whole program.
I think also the way that Srila Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness to the Western world, he didn't just come to New York City and describe the lotus feet of the Lord for 10 years. He gave all kinds of information. So my understanding is similar to the instruction that Sukadev Goswami just gave Maharaj Pariksit. We just read about it recently, where he said, you meditate on these pieces, on these parts of the body of the Lord without forgetting the conception of the whole body. So in the same way, when we study these features of one who's actually in transcendental consciousness, a yogi who is 100% not engaged in anything material, we'll hear about details in the next section, then we can further understand how when we think of the Lord's Rasa dance, as Samapriya was just pointing out, we conceive of that filtered through our material experiences,
right,
which really isn't connecting so clearly with it. So therefore, these beginning steps are necessary for us in order to attain the proper bhava in our hearts when we hear those pastimes.
I accept everything, believe me. But then also Srila Prabhupada has said, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, that if you hear those 5 chapters of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam from the right source, from the right person who is already liberated, who is already on the higher platform, then you can overcome this sex desire. Am I wrong? That's what I've heard. So if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Okay. We are being instructed now to hear those sections, not to ignore them, but it's a process getting there. It's a process. If you read the whole Bhagavatam and then you hear the 10th canto, you will understand it in a deeper manner.
I understand that.
You will
I understand
understand it better.
completely.
And the pure devotee, Bhadra, the pure devotee that we're taking instruction from, Srila Prabhupada, is saying this. So I would prefer not arguing with him, and I'll take the humble position. But we can continue this discussion at another time. I just wanted to have Bakazi speak, and then my husband has to make his presentation. But it's not that I'm ignoring it, because I know it's a very important point. Yes, the pure devotee is strong enough in his devotion to perform all kinds of miracles. Look what Prabhupada did. But he is actually teaching us the bona fide method so that we will not become sahajiya, trying to enjoy the material nature or trying to understand the spiritual world through our material eyes. So I prefer to hear from Srila Prabhupada and humbly take his instructions. So I would suggest that for others, if that's all right. Okay, Akadasi, did you have something that you'd like to say?
Yeah, just a question. So in the first verse that we read it mentions how the process is gradual. And so I'm wondering, as I go through and, and things come up, like I start to see more and more in myself things that I need to work on. So then, is there something that I should do about specific anarthas that I see, or should I just, you just keep going, keep practicing, and eventually that will go away?
Okay. Chetu Darpanamarjanam. Chant Hare Krishna, read the Bhagavatam, and be patient. That's the prescription. We do have a lot of faults. We are very fallen. First thing is to admit it to ourselves that we're very fallen, and take the medicine. Take the prescription. It's being prescribed. Chant the holy name. Hear the Bhagavatam from the self-realized souls. We're doing this. Yes, it's taking some time, but as Nanda told me very kindly, the problem, you're seeing the problem. Is the first thing is to admit, okay, I'm not pure and I'm taking the medicine, and that's our sincerity. So I think that we should go on because we have some other presentation. If that's all right. Akadasi, while I have you there, why don't you just finish reading these last 2 verses?
Hey, Sama, can I just say one thing really quickly?
Yes, Nandaji, of
regarding
course.
to the point about that we see the anartha, or we see the problem in our hearts. One of the points what I make about that is that that's progress, because previously we were so just that's important to understand. Okay, you're seeing that there's difficulty, you're seeing that there's anarthas. That's actually progress. The materialists, they're so covered, they don't see any of those faults, and they're going to the hell. But as our hearts become cleansed, it looks like the room's dirtier, but it actually is progress. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That really encouraged me. That really encouraged me when Nanda told me that. And now I think Bhadra will also be encouraged. Everyone will be encouraged. And Akadasi, please read the rest of this. Thank you. Thank you, Nandaji.
13. The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. 14. Unless the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties, Shantaras.
So we see here that how important these instructions really are. We have to understand the greatness of God, before we think that we can understand the relationship with him in a more personal manner, like dancing with him in the woods. We have to understand his person, and that's what these 2 cantos are all about, understanding the greatness of the person we are trying to develop a relationship with. So I thank you for your kind attention, everyone. I'm going to turn this over to my exalted husband to continue with reading on lesson 8. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. As I put here, lesson 8, and also because this is the end of a month, I want to know if there are any lingering doubts or burning questions that people had specifically over the whole month. As we read about Sukadev Goswami responding to Maharaj Priket's question, his introductory points, the meditation on the Virat Rupa, and now the Paramatma. Is there really anything somebody really doesn't understand that we should spend time on before we progress? Vaishnavi, you have a different view than me. You can see much more people. If you want to help me during this part, choose people that have raised hands, or for the reading, please.
Okay, Radha Sarvastar, can you go?
My turn. I do have a couple questions, comments from this month. So first of all, I really like what Pritam wrote a few days ago about the universal form, because just like when I go walking in the woods and I see the trees, I remember Krishna because trees are the hair on his body and things like that. So that was really helpful to me. But this last discussion about sex desire, there's also different stages of life. I mean, we would not have more people being born, more devotees coming into this world, if the people in their 20s and 30s didn't have any sex desire whatsoever. Then they wouldn't get married, they wouldn't have kids. I mean, you can dovetail all of that. And in terms of fame, adoration, and distinction, that's also kind of a developmental phase of being a young adult, a middle-aged adult as you progress in your career. I think that the question is more, what do you do with it? And I feel like I'm really proud of my son right now, who's 30, and he's he's thriving in his career, and he tithes to multiple spiritual activities. He hosts programs in his home. He's planning to get married to another devotee and do everything in the proper way. So I wouldn't
yeah, Radha, this is understood by everyone. The point that Sukadev Goswami is making to Maharaj Pariksit, if you remember the point, he has a week to live.
Yeah.
And he's pointing out, as we'll go into this yogi, again, this is a good place where we can discuss some of the topics that Bhadra was talking about. There are unlimited types of people in unlimited situations. And what he's giving is a progress, a sense of progress, a process. He's not saying, he's talking about a person who's giving up everything and about to die. Whereas in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives so many different prescriptions about how to perform your duty. So the Vedas present topics on all walks of life. And according to a particular person's subjective situation, his or her own situation, then that's what the guru does. That's why the guru is supposed to know the nature of a particular person and engage him or her adequately according to that nature. And a proper guru wouldn't engage a person who's not in a particular nature in that nature. It's the whole idea is to use our nature in service to God. But the point is that the fruitive mentality of a person who's acting for their own profit, whether it be money or just the results of the action, is opposed. It's the opposite and contaminated sentiment. And it's not service to the Supreme Lord. It's something for oneself. So the action of profit has to be purified. Adoration, rather than glorifying the Lord and having other people and see and get a sense of their pleasure as they glorify God, one wants to have adoration for him or herself, or for the family members, or for the nation. And distinction is how different we are from one another, and how I am unique, and my position is special, and therefore this should be recognized. These are the rather than understanding that we're all parts and parcels of the Supreme and transferring that consciousness. So if we understand sex desire not just as a pushing of a material body so you can have children and expand them, but actually as a sense of consciousness while performing the actions of life, then we can see that this is a process that's being presented in the Vedas, how to elevate oneself so that at the time of death, which we come back to our original point, one can go back to the spiritual world. That's the whole context of the month's teachings.
Thank you.
Okay. Did anybody else have something, Vaishnavi? Oh.
I have a question.
Okay, so Lakshana?
Yeah, when they say meditate on the lotus feet of the Lord, does it mean that you have to meditate on literally or on the instructions given by the spiritual master?
Well, they're both there. As we're reading, the first and second cantos are compared with the lotus feet of the Lord, but the lotus feet of the Lord themselves are also forms that one can fix their mind on. There are insignias and symbols on the bottoms of the Lord's lotus feet, and each one of those represents a particular quality or a particular aspect of the Lord's nature, just like the conch shell. The conch shell is a symbol of Vishnu. It's on the lotus feet of all the different expansions of the Lord. And it's that symbol also deals with how everything in this material world can be used in his service, just like a conch shell. It's a bone of an animal. But in the Vedas, it's given special significance. It's used in deity worship. So it's kind of like an oxymoron. It's like a self-defeating concept, but it's actually true. So the idea is to meditate also on those things.
Thank you.
Sham Govinda had a question? Oh, read. Okay. Sham Govinda, can you read this text? Let's go on to the reading now so that we can do this last section.
Yes, I can read.
Thank you.
2.2.15. O King, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and, regulating the life here, should control the senses by the mind. Notes from the purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 8.14, it is clearly stated that a person who is totally engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord and who constantly remembers him at every step easily obtains the mercy of the Lord by entering into his personal contact. Such devotees do not need to seek any opportune moment to leave the present body. But those who are mixed devotees, alloyed with fruitive action or empirical philosophical speculation, require an opportune moment for quitting this body. For them, the opportune moments are stated in the Bhagavad Gita 8:23 to 26.
Thank you. Vaishnavi, do we have somebody else who can read the next one?
Radha Sylvester, can you go?
Okay, I'm coming. All right, so I'm back. Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. Notes from the purport. The Lord and his service are identical, being on the absolute plane. Therefore, the unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord, and thus the living entity does not remain a seer himself, but becomes seen by the Lord transcendentally. When the living entity is directly seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire. And when the living entity follows him perfectly, the living entity ceases to discharge any other duty for his illusory satisfaction. In his pure unalloyed state, the living being attains the stage of full bliss, labdo pashanti, and ceases all material hankerings.
Thank you. This verse is from the Bhagavad Gita. Wasn't in the purport, but because it rang so closely to that state of consciousness we just read, I put it up. Vaishnavi, do we have somebody else who can read this?
Shobha, would you like to read?
Yeah, as I'll read. Brahma Bhuta Prasanna Atma na Shochati na Kankshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Purport. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he is naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or gain because he is full in service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment because he knows that every living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world someone is as higher and someone as lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral. and the devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, stone and gold are of equal value. This is the Brahma Bhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee.
Thank you. So we can see in the previous verse too. At this point, I want to explain my understanding of the Lord in the heart, which is the title of this chapter. And this verse 16 describes the process, kind of in an overview of it. And I'll talk a little more about the specifics of what's going on. The yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity. This step is one of releasing one's identification with the mind, with the intelligence, and with the conception of the self, which has to deal with the body. If one comes to that plane, then he's actually transferred their consciousness to the spiritual entity. The next one is, and thus merge the living entity into the super self, becoming part and parcel of the Lord. So the state of consciousness being described is Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, na sochati, na kakshati, no hankering, no lamenting. Brahma Bhuta, coming to the plane of pure spirit. On that plane, in that dimension of pure spirit, we are spirit souls. Every spirit soul is Sat Chidananda, Maivam Sa Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, part and parcel of the Lord, conscious entity. So we have the ability of linking with our own consciousness on the spiritual plane. That's where the Lord resides. Meditating on the Lord in the heart means that he's sitting next to us. As that example in the Katha Upanishad of the two birds in the tree. So we're in this body exists, the mind, intelligence, and ahankar of this body exist, but one sees himself or herself separate from that, understanding like the sea waves. And this way, everything becomes ephemeral in the material world as that attention is transferred from everything outside in this material world to that self inside, the actual eternal self. This is the process that Sukadeva Goswami is describing. Okay, this next verse.
Can Ian go? Ian?
1 hour. We've already had all these people. Unmute. Okay, Alec Boyer.
Sorry, I don't have the book in front of me.
You don't need the book. It's on the screen, is it not? Nanda?
Okay, in that transcendental state of Labdho Prasanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves, nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. Notes from the purport: devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods by its manifestations of past, present, and future, does not act on the transcendental plane. The above-mentioned state of affairs is factual on the transcendental plane, but is factually revealed in a transcendentalist knowledge of the advanced state of pure consciousness. The devotees experience the above-mentioned state of affairs by attainment of spiritual forms. Hold on 1 second. Spiritual forms for activity in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. But the impersonalist because of his neglecting the association of the Lord, does not develop a spiritual body for spiritual activities, but remains a spiritual spark only, merged in the effulgent spiritual rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Thank you. Pritam?
Text 18. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. Purport. Everything is looked upon by a devotee as the property of the Lord. The devotee tries to engage everything in his service and does not create perplexities by falsely lording it over the creation of the Lord. He is so faithful that he engages himself as well as everything else in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In everything, the devotee sees the Lord and he sees everything in the Lord.
Thank you.
But
So-
can I just say something real quick? That little purport right there describes the whole process of bhakti yoga.
And describes everything that's going on in this chapters. Sukadev Goswami, what I do to explain a little bit about how I choose how far to go. I try to keep all the different audio readings between half an hour and 40 minutes. So that's why we're ending the month in the middle of a chapter. But interestingly enough, at this particular junction, at the end of these verses, Sukadev Goswami is describing the yogi who actually goes back to Godhead. That's the last verse that we studied in this month. Next month, he goes on to explain, but if one has material desires, and then he describes different planets in the creation and segues into the process of creation. So it's interesting in one sense, we'll get to it in a minute as we go over the review, the entire answer to Maharaj Parikat's question has been encapsulated in this presentation. That what should I do to prepare for death? And more often, what should everyone do? And who can remember the 3 words in Sanskrit which describe the ultimate goal of what everyone should do at the time of death?
Anta Narayana Smriti.
Haha, very good. Excellent. Yes. Ante Narayana Smriti. Ante means after or at the end. Narayana means Narayan, and Smriti means to remember. So this entire process that Sukadev Goswami is presenting to us is how to transfer our consciousness from the entanglement, the banyan tree of entanglement in this material world, become absorbed in the form of the Lord, and as Pritam just read in this purport, how to use everything in the service of the Lord. So the Virat Rupa and the meditation on the Paramatma are perfect foundations for entering into that consciousness. Okay, now we'll go on to the next verse. Is Ananta Sesha another person, or is that you, Vaishnavi?
No, my husband is here. He is following.
Can he read?
Can you read, Danny?
Yeah, which one? It's text 19. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot and by lifting the live air from one place to another in the 6 primary places.
Keep going nicely.
20.
Whoops, you just got the, okay.
The meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air with the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. Text 21. Therefore, the Bhakti Yogi should push the life air up between the eyebrows, and then, blocking the 7 outlets of the life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he is completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme.
So that ends the verses for this particular month with the yogi leaving his body and going back to the Supreme. In the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada points out, and I quoted it in the email that I sent to everybody about this particular lesson, that in this day and age of Kali Yuga with so much disturbance, obviously this method or practice of mechanical yoga, the Ashtanga yoga process, isn't practical. Prabhupada says, but it's even more, he can get even more effective results by chanting the holy name of the Lord, meditating on the form of the Lord, and performing devotional service. So we've been given, in a nutshell, the process. What should a person do before they die? Chant the holy name, meditate on the Lord, and perform devotional service. It's a simple process, but we see that it's because of our entanglement, because of this material world, and because we're eternal spirit souls with so much potency as an eternal entity, that there's a lot more detail into how to perfect those processes. So I want to go over the whole chapter, the whole month, and just cover those topics which were included throughout the whole month. Okay, the first chapter, the first step in God realization. This was when Sukadev Goswami first of all arrived before Maharaj Pariksit. He offered his obeisances to the Lord, and then he explained that in order to answer your question, how a person can attain perfection, leave this world, and go to the desired destination, I will speak the cream of the Vedas. So what we're doing is he's starting to churn. He spoke the cream, we're churning the cream into butter. So the first thing he brought up was chanting the holy name of the Lord. And you remember he brought up chanting Om. The idea again of this Ashtanga yoga process is yama, niyama, asana, and then pranayam. One sits down in a quiet place and starts to meditate on their breath, and then begins to chant Om. This process transfers one's attention from the outside world to the inner spiritual self. Pratyahara is when the senses cease to act outside. Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, deepening that concentration on the actual self. Giving up all attachment to the material body and everything pertaining to it. Family, friends, children, and as Samapriya just spoke, profit, adoration, distinction on the more subtle plane. At the last stage of life, one should. Now I asked Nanda this week what she would like to speak on. And she said that this particular section, out of all the things we spoke of, inspired her. So Nanda, you want to take a minute and please share your realizations?
Yeah, particularly this verse number 15 in this first chapter, because in verse number 15 is, at the last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to be afraid of death. But one must cut off all attachments to the material body and everything pertaining to it and all desires thereof. So previously in today's Zoom meeting, there was a little discussion with Radha, and Dhruva Prabhu was explaining about the different phases of Vedic knowledge. So how at different the instructions we get throughout the Bhagavatam, they strike us at the different stages of life that we're at. So we get instructions of how one should live a proper householder life or brahmachari life. But now, you know, look, it's the end stage of our life. We're in there. There's only a few years left. You know, I've made it this far. I only have a few more years left. So it just like jumps out at you. The last stage of one's life, one should be bold enough not to be afraid of death. Just that statement alone is striking. But then the next statement tells you what it really means. If you're not going to be afraid of death, then you have to cut off all attachments to the body, everything pertaining to it, and all desires thereof. Now that's a tall order. But everything's given for us to be able to do that. And at, you know, just circumstantially in my life, my husband just left his body less than 2 years ago. And the whole process happened so fast. A healthy person leaving his body within 6 weeks of a diagnosis. And so fearlessly did he approach that it was such an amazing faith building experience, as painful as it was, but it was just so like, just like showed me this is the result of having spent your life dedicated to the process. It might not seem like we're making a lot of process during the course of our life, but by following the instructions faithfully, you know, daily, on a daily basis, the spiritual strength and the mercy of the spiritual master is there, so that I could actually see him boldly and fearlessly approach the hour of death. It was quite amazing and quite inspiring for me now, because I'm next. I'm in the line. There's a few people ahead of me and then I'm gone, you know? Anyway, Haribo, that was.
Haribo, thank you very much. Actually, Nanda, it was not only inspiring for you, it was inspiring for our whole community. For those who don't know, Nanda's husband was named Ravanaksha. He had been a devotee for almost 50 years. And in June of 2019, he was diagnosed with leukemia. He was feeling tired. He wasn't feeling right. And the doctors, this is an interesting way that he went about it. Everybody has their own situation and circumstances. But they told him right at the hospital that you should immediately start treatments for this, radiation. And he said, well, I'm going to go home. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to do a little research. Even that moment impressed me, because if a doctor tells you you're going to die, you need radiation, at that moment, what are you going to do? He said, I'll think about it. I'll go home. I saw him a couple of days later, and he had decided that he was going to try some more natural methods. But his basic program for the next month and a half was to have devotees come by and do kirtan, to have readings. And it was an amazing, we all gathered several times a day. Different people would come and read to him, and he really did show, and Nanda as his wife, you guys really did show the proper way to be bold at the time of death and not be afraid and give up all attachments. It was a wonderful example. Just want to share that. Jai.
Jai Nanda.
It was a perfect example of what we've learned. So then Sukadev Goswami goes on to explain, how to become freed from consciousness of the body, desires of the body, and everything pertaining to it. Begins with instructions on the meditation of the form of Vishnu. This is the transformation. This is the crux. Rather than thinking of myself as this body and everything that pertains to it, think of myself as an eternal entity, part and parcel of the Lord, an eternal servant of the Lord, and meditate upon him and his glorification. For the first step, those in the beginning, the description of the Virat Rupa was described. The material world seen as the body of the Lord, characteristics of the Lord in material nature. These are just the various headings that were in each one of the chapters and pages we read. And that brings us to chapter 2. after seeing everything in the material world as a representative of the characteristics of the Lord and stuff, and to be used in his service, the next step was enlightened persons should endeavor only for the bare necessities of life. Why? Because if one engages in expanding his or her attention to the things of this world, then that attention is not on the form of the Lord. There's an easy process, exercise everyone can perform. If you put one finger here and one finger beyond it, just a few inches, and try to focus on both fingers, you can't do it. You can't see both of them clearly. You have to focus on one or the other. In the same way, you can't live in this material world, be attached to everything in it, and at the same time attain transcendence. You have to give your attention to transcendence in order to attain it. Focusing on the ultimate goal of life, then meditation on the supersoul. Maitreya, are you still here? Want to speak something on this meditation on the supersoul? It looks like you joined us a little late if you're still here.
Yeah, I'm joined.
Okay, go ahead.
So, with regard to meditating on the supersoul, so I'm thinking in terms of the exact examples that he gave in this. He talks about making the intelligence unalloyed as part of a prerequisite. So it's not a material process exactly. The supersoul is actually there. He's a person. And in order to experience his presence, we purify ourselves, first of all, through controlling the senses. In our process, we engaged in a devotional service through bhakti. And in fact, in text 21, Shukadeva Goswami mentions that the bhakti yogi pushes his life hair up between the eyebrows. So it's not entirely a mechanical process. It's what some might refer to as Jnana Mishra Bhakti. It's bhakti that's mixed with this scientific knowledge about the life airs and whatnot. But the ultimate goal is the same. It's to give up material enjoyment and to take shelter of the supersoul as his devotee.
Yeah, thank you. So while meditating on the supersoul, one should begin at the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The last section, lesson 8 that we just read about, was how the devotee, how the yogi actually gives up the body by meditating on the Supreme and thus goes to the Supreme. Ante Narayana Smriti, Ante Krishna Smriti, Ante Radha Krishna Smriti, Ante Gaurnitai Smriti. This is what we're being taught. So I want to reiterate once again that if you want to continue into February, you have to click Srimad Bhagavatam 2021, then click February, and then enroll.